Okay, so now that we are looking at 5.1 squared is 26.01, we know 5.1 is equal to the square root of 26.01. Since squares and square roots are, that's right, inverse operations. So I need to find which two square roots the radical 30 or square root of 30 is in between. So I can continue squaring each one of these numbers until I find the two where one is just less than radical 30 and one is just greater than radical 30. So I can continue squaring 5.2. So I'm going to grab my calculator and I'll say 5.2 being squared, 27.04. Okay, so I have to go more. 5.3 being squared, 28.09, getting closer. Let's see. Next one's 5.4 being squared. Oh, even closer, almost there, 29.16. And I bet this is at 5.5 being squared. There it is, 30.25. So I know that radical 30 is in between in between 5.4 and 5.5 because radical 30 is in between radical 29.16 and radical 30.25. But which one is it closer to? Radical 30, well, radical 30 is just 0.25 less than 30.25. And it's about 0.84 more than 29.16. So that means it's slightly closer to 5.5. So I'm going to say that 5.4 is less than radical 30, which is less than 5.5. That's my approximation to the nearest tenth. But that's not good enough. Let's go one more decimal place to the hundredths. So what are my two endpoints? My two endpoints are my approximations, my lower bound and upper bound from my previous one. So 5.40 because we're going to the hundredths and 5.50 because we're going to the hundredths. So let's fill this in. 5.41, 5.42, 5.43, 5.44, 5.45, 5.46, 5.47, 5.48, 5.49, and then we got up to 5.50. Good. I'm glad we didn't make a mistake. So we need to accurately approximate radical 30 to two decimal places. So let's see. I said that it's between these two numbers. Do you remember which one was closer? Oh yes, to 5.5. So let's start on this side. And I already know that 5.5 is radical 30.25. So let's keep going. 5.49 squared. Wow, radical 30 point, I'm just going to put 1401. 5.48 squared. Oh, getting closer, 30.0304. I wonder if this one will be just less. 5.47 squared. Oh, just less. 29.9209. So I know that radical 30 is in between 5.47 and 5.48. But what is it closer to? I need to add 0.1 here to get a little more. But here I need to subtract 0.03. So we're actually going to be closer to 5.48. So again, our lower bound approximation, 5 and 47 hundredths, is less than radical 30. but radical 30 is less than 5 48/100. So this is my approximation to the nearest hundredth. And the reason why we'd want to do that is to give approximate values of each expression using whole numbers, tenths, and hundredths. So if I look at whole numbers, radical 30, we said, is about 5. It's closer to 5. So if I want to approximate using whole numbers 2 plus radical 30, I'm going to use my whole number approximation of 30 and substitute that in. So for whole numbers, 2 plus radical 30, 2 plus 5 is 7. So my whole number approximation is 7. Well, what if I want a more accurate answer? I want to the nearest tenths. Well, what was our approximation of radical 30 to the nearest tenth? We said to the nearest tenth, radical 30 is in between 5.4 and 5.5, but closer to 5.5. So which number should we use? We know that it's going to be 5.4 something, but it's going to be closer to 5.5. So if we were rounding to the nearest tenth, we'd say 5.5. So going back to down here to the nearest tenth, 2 plus radical 30, substituting in my answer rounded to the nearest tenth, 2 plus 5.5 gets me 7.5 to the nearest tenth. Well, to the hundredths, we said that our number is between 5.47 and 5.48, but closer to 5.48. So rounded to the nearest hundredths, we would say 5.48. So 2 plus radical 30 is about 2 plus 5.48. So that would be 7.48. Interesting. Let's keep looking at part B. Now we're going to use our same number approximations, but instead of adding, we're going to be multiplying. So we're going to be multiplying our values. So 3 times radical 30. And our whole number approximation was 5, so 3 times 5, about 15. To the tenths, 3 times radical 30. When they're next to each other, they're being multiplied. 3 times 5.5 gets me about 16.5. And hundredths, 3 times radical 30, where we know radical 30 is about 5.48 when we round it to the nearest hundredths. We get an answer of about 16.44. So remember, these are approximate values, so it's going to be close to, but not exact. Okay, let's turn the page. You have another problem to do, just like we just did. You're going to be estimating radical 52 to the whole number, the tenths and the hundredths, and then doing subtraction and division with your best approximation. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to finish this. So if you can please pause the video and set the timer for 5 minutes. If you finish early, feel free to move on to the next page. 5 minutes, finishing 3 and 4. Finishing 3 and 4, please pause the video for 5 minutes. Let's see how we did. Which two integers is radical 52 between? Radical 52 is between 7 and 8, but because 52 is closer to 49, radical 52 is closest to 7. So I have radical 52 between 7 and 8. That means my next number line is in between 7 and 8. And when I was squaring those numbers, I found that the square root of 52 is in between the square root of 51.84 and 53.29, which is 7.2 and 7.3, but slightly closer to 7.2. And then to the hundredths, squaring those numbers, I found that radical 52 is between 7 and 21 hundredths and 7 and 22 hundredths. So then when I got to doing the work, I knew that I was using 7 for my integer approximation, 7.2 for my tenths, and 7.21 for my hundredths, making that arithmetic. Remember, you want to use the number that your value is closest to. I know here it says whole number and 3.5 is not a whole number. So if you decided to say 3 as your final answer because you're truncating, just deleting the rest of the number, or 4 because you're rounding up to the nearest whole number, I would accept both of those as well, along with to the hundredths because this is to the thousandths place. If you told me that this was 3.60 because you truncated, truncate rounding means you're just chopping off the rest of the number. Or if you use decimal rounding, if you said this was 3.61, because that's what it is rounded to the nearest hundredth, that's completely fine as well. Thank you, and let's continue. Taking a look at our next part of the lesson, if we turn the page, it says without using the square root button on your calculator, order the following numbers from least to greatest. Just like when we were ordering decimals or fractions, we wanted all of them to be written in the same format. So looking here, I want to write them all as radicals or all as decimals. It looks like this might be simpler to write them all as radicals. 8 is radical 64. 9 is radical 81. And notice it tells me here that 8½ squared is 72.25. So this is the square root of 72.25. And remember, this is because square rooting and squaring are inverse operations. So if I square and take the square root, I'm really not changing the value of the number. So what is, I'm going least to greatest or greatest to least? Least to greatest. So I'm going to write that least to greatest so I don't forget. If I want to go from least to greatest, the smallest number under the radical is 62. So radical 62 would be the smallest. Now, who's the next smallest here? 64. So because I was given 8 as the number, I always want to list my numbers in the form I was given to them. Okay, so that number's gone. What's bigger? 80, 81, 72. 72.25, which was 8.5. That makes sense. 8 is less than 8.5. That's good. Reasonableness. Which one's smaller? Because we're going least to greatest. Radical 80. And ending with 9. So there's my final answer. I'd like you to do 6 and 7 with your groups. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Please pause the video and set the timer for 3 minutes and finish 6 and 7. And this is actually the end of this video. It only lets me record up to 15 minutes. So you can start the next video after the end of those 3 minutes, please. Thank you.